It's tabletop time! I'm Dave, and today I get to play with Pokemon. Yes, that's right, we are making something really different, a bit interesting. A 3D Pokemon card diorama. And we're also gonna ask the age-old question, do you like mudkits? So the first step I needed to take on my Pokemon card diorama journey was to find some good 3D files I could print of the Pokemon themselves. Pokemon are quite smooth and simple creatures when you take away their colors and textures, and while I could have attempted sculpting them, my many hours perusing my mini factory had meant that I had previously found some fantastic Pokemon models. I was really just looking for an excuse to use. While usually I would love to give massive shout outs to creators for making really cool things like that, I actually don't want to draw the wrong kind of attention to these creators who are providing free files of things that they could maybe get in trouble for. So to that end, I'll just say they look awesome and they're great, and use Google. Google's your friend. I chose to print the Pokemon in 3 different sizes. Knowing I was building a diorama with depth, I already had thought that I would use some forced perspective and scale the Pokemon in the background so I could have an unrealistic depth. Rather than using the natural depth of the box, we're trying to simulate an environment. So smaller Pokemon in the background would give the effect of different depth of field. With the Pokemon printed, I gave them a bath in isopropyl alcohol. I don't recommend doing this with actual Pokemon as it will probably kill them. Once the isopropyl alcohol had taken care of any uncured resin, I washed them in some hot water, which made it very easy to remove the supports. Now lucky, all 3 of these Pokemon find their natural homes in water and they didn't suffer any undue stress being submerged in it. After a quick spin in the UV curer, they were ready to play with. So I used foam core to create a rough and ready simple core box structure that may end up housing some lighting components in the future. I then built up the frames around the sides using balsa wood. I chose to use balsa wood on the sides for its nice wood grain and ability to sand to a curve to match the Pokemon card. However, I chose to use foam core on the front and back as it would be better for adhering to the Pokemon cards themselves that I'd later be gluing onto the box. The other thing is foam core will be a lot easier to cut into, which means for when I make the open frame at the art section of the card, doing that with balsa would have been a lot more work and risk the wood splintering and moving in a rather terrible looking fashion. With the rough shape of the box built, I could start getting a little bit more adventurous. And it was time to move on to, well, getting, as usual, over ambitious.
Okay. There's a rectangle, and you want
Times 2 out of clear acrylic. I probably think you shouldn't look directly into that.
It's fine. I asked if it's safe.
What was their answer?
I don't remember.
Today's sponsor is NordVPN, and we love them so much that we have colored the room to match their white and blue theme. NordVPN is the fastest VPN out there as shown by speed tests, and it will securely encrypt your browsing so that you can visit its 5,100 plus servers over 60 countries. Access that content that might be geo-blocked in your area, maybe go onto some other country's Netflix catalog and watch something that you've been unable to watch for a while.
This is about the thrill of wearing another man's skin.
It just takes 1 click to change your location. You just open the map, click the button, and you'll be connected in seconds. If you're more into gaming, you can make sure that you can get games that are perhaps not available in your region, or edited or cut versions of them have been made available that you want to play the original version of. South Park, Stick of Truth, anyone? Well, if that's the case, just chuck onto NordVPN, change your region in your game software, and download from other country stores. It's great. It means everyone has access to the same information. Thank you, NordVPN. If you've been browsing unsecurely and unsafely without a VPN and would like one, go to NordVPN/tabletop and use the discount code tabletop for 2 years plan with an additional free month at excellent prices. Come on, don't wait. Get your NordVPN subscription now. How do you think we've been dodging Pokemon Company this whole time? They'll never know. The first thing I did was mask out an area that I would be using for the water. I'd later be pouring resin on this. And then I laid down some cork, smaller bits towards the back, growing to medium, and then all the way up to the front where I used resin and bark pieces. I was trying to attempt a sort of forced perspective by using smaller rocks as it went further back. With the rocks glued on, I slathered on a liberal helping of a wet mud texture paint. And then towards the front, where I wanted to build even more of that forced perspective, I used some sculptor mold to shape up the mound. While the diorama base was setting, it was time for me to paint some Pokemon. Pokemon typically use single colors rather than lots of different colors and blends, so I knew the airbrush would be the best way to get that really smooth, cartoony finish. I picked out a nice yellowy orange for the Psyduck and sprayed the majority of that, using it almost like a zenithal and leaving the lower areas darker due to the base coat. From the very top, I mixed up a lighter yellow just to give a soft gradient to all the flesh. Moving from the skin on, I went to Psyduck's beak and his little paddlers. They were done in a off-white bone color with a soft highlight on top. Being that they're cartoony, the eyes were done in a flat white with the pupils in the center just a matte black. I also painted the little tufts of hair on Psyduck's head in black as well. As a final touch on Psyduck, and given the pose he was modeled in, I gave him his characteristic big red blush, as if Misty has just said something nice about him for once. Now the two Mudkips I chose to use, I painted in the same way. I picked some appropriate blues and did the gradient method similar to the Psyduck. Then painted the sides of his head, those weird little finny Mudkip bits, in oranges highlighted up to yellow. I used a very soft blue-gray for his underbelly and his tail, then painted the inside of his mouth with a fleshy red, leaving the tongue pinker. I gotta say, I really liked painting this Mudkip. You could say I like Mudkips, and I liked this one in particular. Its sculpt is very fun. Finally, we have the Mew that I printed. I airbrushed this with a mix of about 4 different pink to whites from the top down in increasing zenithals. And when Rob came in and looked at it, he was like, wow, that's really pink. Does Mew really look like that? And he was surprised to learn that Mew is basically just one flat tone of pink. Check out the art online. He's a very basic looking Pokemon in terms of color. For the eyes on Mew, I painted the sides in a white. I painted the lower part in a crescent of a lighter blue and the upper part of the eye in a dark blue, with the center leaving space for a little white dot of reflection. This very closely emulated the anime look, and it was also really easy to paint because even though it was printed incredibly finely, there's a really subtle indent in this model where the eyes are actually sculpted to be easier to paint. Beneath his toe beans, Mew has a little foot pad, which I painted in a soft but darker pinky orange. The Pokemon were painted and now it was time to make an environment for them to live in. To get the effect of that foreshortening or that false perspective, aside from using slightly smaller scaled Pokemon toward the back of the model, I used a lot of Gamer's Grass tufts. These tufts were made for different scales or sizes, so I used the larger 12mm tufts for towards the front of the base, going back all the way down to 2mm tufts at the very back. I had a little bit of variation and crossover in the middle section, just to give the illusion that there were different sized grasses and bushes, a bit of natural variation. With all the tufts and bushes stuck on, it was time to peel off the masking tape. Now when this came up, it did pull a little bit of that mud technical with it and some of the tufts, but I was not bothered at all. It was perfectly acceptable and I kind of expected it, to be honest. Any mistakes would be fixed up with liquid resin. With the masking up, I glued on my Pokemon and set to work making a mix of UV resin. I mixed in a small amount of pigment, which ultimately didn't appear to be very much for the first pour. So then I dropped in some more pigment while it was setting on the model and stirred it in as a kind of mud on the base around and near the shores. This is one of the areas of the model that didn't turn out quite how I envisioned it, but as I'm still fairly new to using UV resins and water effects, I was still pretty happy with the result. Once this first layer had cured, I mixed a stronger amount of a light green pigment through and then poured on a second coat, leaning the diorama towards the front to again kind of try and create that forced perspective where the line of the earth was not parallel to the ground level or the plane of the acrylic. This would be because I'd be setting it up at a slight angle so you could really see everything that was showcased in the diorama. For the inside of the diorama, I airbrushed gradients of blue to give the effect of sky, and then to help hide the seam line between the acrylic at the top, I glued in some puffs of cotton wool as if they were clouds. The last thing I needed to do to help sell the interior of the diorama was to create some little tree branches coming in from either side. These were done using Woodland Scenics forest kits, and I dipped the twigs into some glue, added some flock, created some very nice looking natural branches or treetops. With everything dry on the base, I glued it inside and then masked it up to seal it away so I could spray the outside of this box blue to match the backing of a Pokemon card. With the sprays down, it was time to glue on my sacrificial Pokemon cards right onto the back. As a final step, it was time to cut the official Mudkip card. So I cut it out and glued it onto the front, and then affixed it in with a frame that I made out of some wooden popsicle sticks. Onto this frame, I decided to destroy just one more Pokemon card, as I cut the 25th celebration Pikachu symbol off that card and glued it onto the front of the frame. With all that said, I'll bet you probably want to have a look at this diorama. So here it is. And here we are once again at the end of a tabletop time video. I hope you enjoyed the journey. I got to make a really cool 3D Pokemon card, which was an interesting project and one that really took me back to my childhood, so it was a lot of fun. Once again, a thank you to our sponsor, NordVPN, and also a thank you to our patrons. It's through your support we've been able to do all these awesome videos, and we've loved seeing all your submissions to our recent patron-only mini review and checking out all the things you've been working on. So thank you once again, and I hope you all enjoyed the video. And until the next one, go out there and catch them all, I guess. Yeah, Pokemon related.